Attempts to reconnect with my estranged daughter drove her to move in with a secret boyfriend, and now she's gone. I'm a 59-year-old father, and my daughter, Jen, is 24. Our relationship hasn't always been the closest. I worked long hours when she was young, missed most of her school events and meetings, and, to be honest, struggled with anger issues and a job I hated. Things between us were tough for the first 18 years of her life. When Jen went off to college out of state, she completely cut contact with me. Not a word, no matter how many times I offered to help her with books, rent, or anything she might need. During holidays, she'd come back to town, but always stayed with my ex-wife and her new husband. Last year, Jen returned to our city for work, and just last month, she started law school here. My ex-wife and Jen are still tight, but since my ex is busy caring for her husband's elderly father who lives with them, Jen needed a place to stay. She moved in with me. She can't work this year because law school is so demanding, yet she insists on paying her portion of utilities and groceries, despite my protests. We have completely different tastes in food, so she handles her own groceries anyway. I know I don't need the money, but she insists. Living together, we honestly don't feel like family, we're more like strained roommates. Our relationship has become a collection of small but persistent grievances. For example, Jen wears sweatpants and t-shirts to school every day. I offered, as kindly as I could, to take her shopping for professional attire, suits, skirts, blouses, something more in line with what I imagine future lawyers wear. She flat out refused, and the sweatpants remain her daily uniform. I keep thinking you can't show up to court in sweats, but what do I know? Then there's breakfast. I noticed Jen makes an omelet for herself every morning, so I thought I'd save her the trouble and started waking up early to make her omelets. She told me she doesn't like how I do them anymore and asked me to stop cooking for her. That stung. I still remember her begging for my omelets as a little girl. And then there's her schedule. She's out until after 8 p.m. every night, telling me she's studying at school or hitting the gym. With the days getting shorter and darker, I worry about her safety. I keep telling her she should study at home and be back earlier, but she just brushes me off. The tension boiled over last Friday. She came home at 9 p.m., out in the pitch dark, and admitted she'd been at a bar with her classmates. Midterms were over and they were celebrating. No text, no call. It bothered me. I tried to talk to her calmly, but she lost it, yelled that she had every right to see her friends. I tried to reason with her, reminded her that school comes first, that she should have let me know where she was. When she grabbed her keys and tried to leave, I stood in front of the door, practically begging her not to drive in the state she was in, not to go out drunk and in the dark. She just retreated to her room. After that, we didn't speak the entire weekend. She still comes home late and barely acknowledges me. I can't help but worry that maybe law school is too much for her, that she's drowning. I want to help, but every attempt just becomes another fight. The truth is, I'm afraid every little concern I express is driving us further apart. I can't shake the feeling that I'm at fault for the constant conflict. It's not about controlling every little thing, but I am deeply concerned about my daughter. The aftermath of our blow-up left our relationship hanging by a thread. I realized I've been wrong on so many fronts. I can't dictate her curfew, I can't decide how she dresses, and I have to let her make her own life choices, even if I disagree. I'm terrified of losing Jen for good. Since that Friday night meltdown, we've been walking on eggshells. I tried, more than once, to reach out. At night before bed, I'd knock on her door, wanting to talk, hoping to bridge the silence, but she wouldn't answer. She locked her door. These days she leaves before I wake up and comes home after 9 or 10 at night. Each evening, I wait, unable to sleep until she's safely home. I greet her every night, but she just breezes past me to her room. If she cooks, it's late or when I'm not around. Living like this is unbearable. My own daughter feels like a stranger to me. It's hard not to spiral back to when she was 13 or 14 and suddenly wanted nothing to do with me. She'd recoil from hugs and kisses, even yell if I put food on her plate. I know I screwed up. Years of overwork and my temper left their mark, and I tried to repair some of that damage by going to therapy after the divorce, though I had to stop during the pandemic. But Jen seems stuck with the same impression of who I used to be, blind to the man I'm trying desperately to become. This morning, for the first time in days, I saw an opening. She was at the kitchen table, eating breakfast before class, scrolling through her phone. I tried to make conversation but she ignored me. The old me might have lost it, grabbed her phone and smashed it. I swallowed that urge and let her be. I've stopped making omelets for her, but I've been setting out bowls of fruit instead. She never touches them. I'm not a bad father, I just failed in the past, and I'm trying so desperately to do right by her now. I'm scared it's too late. After a week of silence, an unbearable cold war, I decided something had to give. I waited outside Jen's bedroom door, determined not to let this rift widen any further. When she finally emerged, I asked if we could talk. I apologized. Told her I was sorry for treating her like a child, when she's a capable adult, well into graduate school. But I also said that I couldn't keep living as strangers under the same roof. If she truly couldn't treat me like her father, maybe we should look into her moving out and finding a roommate. I ended, perhaps stubbornly, by saying I can't be ignored in my own house. She was quiet for a moment, then offered a soft, "Okay, sure. Sorry, Dad." I tried for a hug, Too hopeful, probably, but she slipped past me. I understood. She needed time. I didn't press it. Since then, we speak again. We exchange good morning and good night, a small step, but more than we managed all week. I stopped cooking for her, let go of my expectations for when she'd come home. Now, she texts me when she's heading back. That, to me, is a win. I've committed to being a better father. I hope she sees these changes. I'm feeling hopeful again, like things can get better. Things have been ever so slightly smoother since that last talk. Jen is still awkward around me, despite my apologies for earlier behavior. I realize an incident this morning may have derailed the small progress we were making. Around 9 a.m., I walked into the kitchen while Jen was cooking her breakfast. I tried chatting with her, hoping maybe this time something would finally click between us. She had class at 11 that morning. I noticed she already had the kettle heating up, and next to it sat a cup with a tea bag ready to go. Since she was busy cooking, I figured I'd help out. I grabbed the milk from the fridge and poured a little into the bottom of her cup, just trying to make things a bit easier for her. Simple, right? Well, apparently not. Suddenly, she got an attitude with me. She told me she likes to pour the hot water over the tea bag first, let it sit for a bit, and only then add milk and sugar. I tried to explain that I was just being helpful, taking a step off her hands, but she cut me off, insisting that the taste wouldn't be right, that adding milk before the hot water would somehow destroy this sacred tea-making process of hers. Honestly, I thought this was complete nonsense. It felt like she just wanted to pick a fight. For the first time in a long while, I snapped. I told her, okay, you don't want me to cook for you, and seriously, what kid doesn't want to wake up or come home to a hot meal? You don't want my help making tea, so what is it that you want from me? Just a place to live? She looked at me and, as blunt as could be, said yes. That's correct. I just sat there in the kitchen, silent, watching her finish what she was cooking, eat, and clean up. She really put on a show, too, dumping out the cup I'd prepared in front of me, grabbing a new one, and making tea exactly the way she said she wanted. I stayed in the kitchen the entire time, and when she left for class, she didn't say a word to me, even though I made it pretty clear I thought she owed me an apology. So after all that, I found myself just sitting and stewing over the morning's events. I started to wonder if maybe it was time to really ask her to move out. I didn't want to be the bad guy without a good reason, but I also needed to know if she was just taking advantage of living with me. Was I making a mountain out of a molehill here? Was this really all just a minor spat? Time really gets away from me. I remember when my daughter Jen was little. She's in law school now, by the way. Back then, she always wanted to hug me, kiss me, crawl all over me. Honestly, sometimes I'd beg her for a little personal space. But then the teenage years hit, and suddenly she wanted nothing to do with me. I was a fool not to appreciate how close we once were. Looking back now, I realize how much I took her affection for granted. Just this past Saturday, Jen came to me out of the blue and told me she'd be moving out that coming weekend, right before Thanksgiving. Of all times, my mind was racing. Where was she moving? Who with? Jen has always been secretive. All she told me was that she was moving in with her boyfriend. My jaw nearly hit the floor, especially because I had no idea she even had a boyfriend. When I asked her how long, she told me almost 3 years. They met in college and started dating. He's a year older and already working in the city. The apartment she's moving into is closer to her school. I felt sick to my stomach. All these years, I thought Jen wasn't interested in dating. Through high school, for dances and major events, she'd always go with friends, never a date. Whenever I'd ask her if she was seeing anyone, she'd just roll her eyes, looking like the very idea disgusted her. Eventually, I stopped bothering to ask. Now, she tells me she's been in a relationship all this time, and she's moving in with him. I asked when I could meet this guy. Let's call him Dan. She said he'd come by that weekend to help her move, but I told her she wasn't moving in with a stranger, not if I'd never even met him. She just laughed and said I'd have a hard time stopping her. Is that a challenge, Jen? I tried to figure out how she'd even afford it. The city's expensive, that's why I live out here in the suburbs. She told me Dan's family owns the apartment. Actually, they own several properties. She'd split costs and utilities with him. She did work through college and for a year afterward, but I didn't think she had that much money set aside. Honestly, I don't really know this Dan guy. She wouldn't even give me his last name. For a moment, I considered calling my ex to see if she knew what was going on, but the idea of her knowing about Dan when I was totally in the dark just made my stomach turn. If I'm being fully honest, I'm just not comfortable with her moving in with a boyfriend. Jen, for all her law school ambitions, isn't the brightest. She was always a solid B student at best, never on any honor roll as far as I know. I worry she just doesn't see the risks in all of this, that she isn't making a wise choice. But I'm trying to honor her wishes and not corner her into staying. One thing that really stung, I asked if she'd come back for Thanksgiving, and she told me no. She'd be spending it with Dan's family because, according to her, I never seemed interested in celebrating Thanksgiving, and this was the first time I'd ever mentioned wanting plans. She wasn't wrong. I'm not really a holiday person, but if it would make her happy, I would have picked up turkey and sides from a restaurant. Truth is, I have no idea what she does for Thanksgiving anymore. We haven't spent one together since the divorce. But I want to try, truly try, to start a new tradition with her. I followed her to her room, asking if she'd reconsider just waiting another year, at least until she was more financially secure and socially settled. She just looked at me kinda sideways and said no, then closed the door right in my face. I'll admit it, I'm absolutely floored by how quickly everything is changing. I know I thought about wanting her to move out, I did. I just didn't expect it to happen so soon, and now I feel like my daughter's slipping away from me, faster than I ever imagined. I'm not sure what to do, or if trying to talk to her again will even help. How am I supposed to handle this? Update 1. I woke up this morning to an empty house. I couldn't help myself, I drifted to Jen's old room, the space she'd lived in for so long, now oddly hollow, stripped down to a shell with just the things she chose to leave behind. My daughter Jen, 24 years old, moved out on Saturday. She left some boxes and suitcases by the front door, the mark of her presence already fading. I sat at the kitchen table, waiting for her boyfriend, Dan, to arrive. Somehow, we'd never met until that morning, and I thought we needed to talk properly before everything changed. Dan showed up, introduced himself, shook my hand, and then, as though I wasn't even there, he said about helping Jen carry her things to his car. I sat there, staring at him, hoping to communicate just how inappropriate I thought his behavior was. But both of them, my Jen and her new Dan, just ignored my presence entirely. In 15 minutes, she was ready to go. At last, Jen came up to me. She said simply she was leaving, placing her keys on the table. I pointed out she'd need them to come back, and she looked me dead in the eye and said, "I'm not coming back." That hit like a punch to the gut. My emotions swelled, my heart felt unsteady. I got up, arms outstretched, waiting for a goodbye hug like I always had. When she was younger, she'd see my arms open and launch herself at me, sending me reeling with her love. But this time, she stepped back and offered me her hand. A handshake. From my own daughter. Nothing in my life had ever hurt like that. I walked them out. I told her I'd be alone on Thanksgiving unless she decided to come home. I even promised I would get her a pumpkin pie if she showed up. But she shook her head and reminded me, she'd already promised Dan and his family she'd spend Thanksgiving with them. So nothing was changing there either. Feeling the pressure building, I seized the moment and told Dan to take care of my daughter and to treat her with respect. Dan just gave me the smuggest little smile you could imagine, nodded, and said, "Of course I will." I wanted so badly to wipe that look right off his face. I felt certain that if Dan hadn't come along, things would not have ended up like this. In my mind, he'd manipulated Jen into leaving me, also I'd be left alone. Jen then asked if she could come back to pick up her desk and chair the following week, once they had more space in the car. I told her I was going to burn her desk the minute she left. Dan, with his usual sarcasm, just said, "Don't worry, I'll get you a better desk." Jen just shrugged and walked away with him. I stood there and watched them drive off. The tears wouldn't stop. I cried all afternoon, and then again the next morning. Everything felt empty. I had spent so many mornings listening for her footsteps in the kitchen, knowing that meant it was time to get up. Now it seemed there was no reason to get out of bed at all. Cooking for myself felt pointless. I sat in front of the TV for an hour, just staring at a blank screen. My daughter has left me, and I feel like there's nothing to live for anymore. I even took a day off from work because I kept breaking down in tears and knew I'd get nothing done. I texted her this morning, no response. I don't want to overwhelm her in this new chapter of her life, especially since it's clear I'm not part of it, but I need to reach her again, to apologize, to talk, anything. A lot has changed, though the heaviness still sits with me. I started therapy a few weeks ago, 3 sessions so far. I'm not sure how much I've changed, but I know I'm desperate to fix things with Jen. Thanksgiving was almost unbearable. I spent it completely alone. That morning, I sent Jen one last text inviting her over, but she never responded. I tried calling, straight to voicemail, which only confirmed her phone was working. That day was the lowest I've ever felt, and the darkness lingered for days. I'm still not happy that she's living with Dan, especially after the way he acted when they moved her out, but for now I'm trying to let go. She's living her life, and she's free to make her own mistakes. I reminded myself of this over and over. Since she left, I've sent her a simple text about once a day, just a hi or a love you, sometimes just a smiley face so she'd know I'm thinking of her. I never expected her to reply every time, but so far, she hadn't replied at all. Until today, my therapist suggested I take a leap and invite both Jen and Dan over for Christmas. The idea of having Dan in my house again makes my skin crawl, but the urge to see Jen, even for a few hours, is stronger than any resentment. I went back and forth but decided to send the invitation. This morning, I finally texted her. I invited both her and Dan for Christmas. She replied about an hour ago, finally, a response, that they would be spending Christmas in Mexico and wouldn't be back until the new year. I immediately called. She didn't pick up. I panicked a little and texted that it sounded like an expensive trip she probably couldn't afford, telling her she should use her winter break to get ready for next semester. No response. Fear crept in and I blurted out the worst thing I could, texting her that if she went, I'd call the cops and have Dan arrested for kidnapping. The second I hit send, Regret overwhelmed me. I quickly sent another message, apologizing, insisting I didn't mean it, that I'm just worried about her safety and 8 days in Mexico seems like a long time. She still hasn't replied to my apology. Now I can't help but fear that I've ruined any last chance of seeing Jen over the holidays. The thought of another lonely holiday eats away at me, especially as everyone else seems to gather with their families. I just don't know if I can handle another holiday by myself. I wish I knew how to fix things. Update 2. I thought things couldn't get worse after my kidnapping threat text. I was wrong. 2 weeks went by without a word from Jen. My therapist kept telling me to give her space, but the silence was eating me alive. I'd catch myself checking my phone every 5 minutes, hoping for anything. Even an angry message would have been better than nothing. Then, last Tuesday, my ex-wife Sarah called me out of the blue. We barely speak unless it's about Jen, so I knew something was up the moment I heard her voice. "We need to talk," she said, and my stomach dropped. Turns out, Jen had been staying with Sarah and her husband for the past week. Not with Dan like I thought. She'd shown up at their door crying, asking if she could sleep on their couch for a few days. Sarah said Jen looked exhausted, like she hadn't been sleeping, and kept checking her phone obsessively. But here's the kicker, Sarah thinks Jen and Dan broke up. She wouldn't tell Sarah exactly what happened, just that she needed time to think and couldn't be around Dan right now. Sarah tried getting more details, but Jen shut down every time his name came up. My first instinct was relief. Maybe this meant she'd come home, maybe we could start over without Dan's influence poisoning everything between us. But Sarah crushed that hope pretty quickly. "She's terrified of you," Sarah told me bluntly. "She showed me your texts, including that insane one about calling the cops. She thinks you've completely lost it." I tried explaining that I was just worried, that the Mexico trip seemed suspicious, but Sarah cut me off. She said Jen had been planning to reach out and maybe try to repair things with me before the holidays, but my threat had scared her so badly that she was now considering getting a restraining order. A restraining order? Against her own father. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what could have happened between Jen and Dan. Part of me wondered if I'd been right to be suspicious of him all along. Maybe he really had been manipulating her, maybe the Mexico trip was some kind of red flag I'd picked up on instinctively. By Thursday, I couldn't take it anymore. I drove to Sarah's house. Sarah answered the door looking annoyed but not surprised. "She doesn't want to see you," she said before I could even speak. 5 minutes, I begged, "Just let me apologize properly. Face to face." "Absolutely not. You need to leave." But as Sarah was closing the door, I saw Jen appear behind her in the hallway. She looked terrible, pale, thinner than when she'd moved out, with dark circles under her eyes. For a split second, our eyes met, and I saw something that shook me to my core. She looked afraid. Not just angry or frustrated like usual, but genuinely afraid. "Jen, please," I called out, but she'd already disappeared back into the house. Sarah stepped outside and closed the door behind her. "You need help," she said quietly. "Professional help. And until you get it, you need to stay away from her." I drove home in a daze. That look in Jen's eyes kept haunting me. When had I become someone my own daughter was afraid of? Yesterday, my therapist and I had what she called a breakthrough session. She helped me see how my behavior patterns, the controlling, the anger when things don't go my way, the inability to respect boundaries, have been consistent throughout Jen's entire life. She said Jen probably felt like she was walking on eggshells around me for years, never knowing when I might explode. The kidnapping text wasn't just one bad moment. It was the culmination of decades of me making Jen feel unsafe in her own relationship with her father. I've decided to write Jen a letter, not a text, not a voicemail, but an actual handwritten letter that I'll give to Sarah to pass along. In it, I'm going to take full responsibility for everything, not just the recent stuff, but for all the years I made her childhood difficult with my anger and absence. I'm going to tell her she was right to move out, right to put distance between us, and that I don't expect forgiveness. But I'm also going to ask her one thing: if she ever decides she wants to try again, I'll be here. Different, better. Actually change this time, not just promising to change. I know she might never respond. I know I might spend next Christmas alone too, and the one after that. But at least I'll know I finally told her the truth, that none of this was ever her fault, and that I'm sorry it took me 59 years to figure out how to be the father she deserved. The hardest part is accepting that being a good father now might mean accepting that she's better off without me. Update 3. I wrote the letter. Took me 4 drafts and 3 sleepless nights, but I finally got it right. No excuses, no deflecting, just me taking responsibility for 24 years of being the father Jen deserved better than. I drove to Sarah's house last Monday morning, handed her the sealed envelope, and asked her to please give it to Jen when she felt ready to read it. Sarah looked at me differently this time. Less angry, more sad, I think. She said she'd pass it along but made it clear that Jen might not be ready to engage with me for a very long time, if ever. I told her I understood. For 3 days, nothing. I threw myself into work, went to therapy twice that week instead of once, and tried to prepare myself for the possibility that the letter would be the last thing I ever said to my daughter. Then Thursday evening, my phone rang. Unknown number. "Dad?" Jen's voice was barely above a whisper. My heart nearly stopped. Jen, hi, sweetheart. I read your letter. Long pause. Can we meet somewhere? Not your house. Not Sarah's. Somewhere neutral. We agreed on a coffee shop downtown. I got there 30 minutes early and sat in the back corner, checking my watch every few seconds. When she walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. She'd cut her hair short, really short, and she looked like she'd lost more weight. But what struck me most was how she carried herself. Cautious. Guarded. She sat across from me, hands wrapped around her coffee cup like it was an anchor. I'm sorry about Dan, I said, because I had to start somewhere. She gave me a sharp look. How did you? Never mind. Sarah told you. Are you okay? You look tired. I know. She sighed. Dan and I. It's complicated. I waited. My old self would have pushed for details, demanded to know what he'd done to her. But my therapist's voice was in my head. Listen. Don't fix. Just listen. He never actually broke up with me, she said eventually. I found out he's been seeing someone else. For months. Maybe longer. The rage that shot through me was white hot, but I kept my voice level. I'm sorry, Jen. That must have been devastating. She laughed bitterly. You know what the worst part is? I almost didn't care about the cheating. What got to me was realizing how little I actually knew about him. 3 years together, and I didn't even know his middle name. He never let me meet his family properly, always had some excuse. Turns out there's a reason for that. She took a shaky breath. His family doesn't own any apartments, Dad. He was subleasing from a friend who was traveling. The Mexico trip? He was going with her. His real girlfriend. I was just convenient. I felt sick. All my instincts about Dan had been right, but being right felt terrible when it meant Jen had been hurt. Where are you living now? I asked gently. Sarah's couch, but that's not sustainable. Her father-in-law's health is getting worse, and they need the space. She looked up at me for the first time since sitting down. I've been thinking about what you wrote. About being different now. I meant every word. I know you think you did. Her voice was careful. But you've said that before, Dad. After the divorce, you promised things would be different. When I was in high school and you went to therapy, you promised. I can't keep hoping and getting disappointed. The words hit like a physical blow, but she was right. I'd made promises before without doing the real work to change. What would it take? I asked. For you to consider giving me one more chance? She was quiet for a long time. Boundaries, she said finally. Real ones. I'm not your little girl anymore, and I can't have you treating me like I am. No monitoring when I come and go. No opinions about my clothes or my food or my career choices, and absolutely no commenting on my dating life. Okay. I mean it, Dad. I know you think you're being protective, but it feels controlling. It always has. I nodded, even though every instinct screamed against it. What else? You keep going to therapy. Not just when things are bad, regularly. And. She hesitated. I want to go to a session with you. With your therapist. So we can talk about all of this with someone neutral there. Of course. Whatever you need. And I pay rent, real rent, not just utilities. Market rate for a room in your house. Jen, you don't need to, this is non-negotiable. Her voice was firm. If I'm going to live there, it's as a tenant, not as your dependent daughter. I need to know I can leave if things don't work out. The word tenant stung, but I understood why she needed that distance. Okay, I said. All of it. Yes. She studied my face for a long moment. I'll try it for 3 months. If at any point I feel like we're falling back into old patterns, I'm gone. And this time, I won't come back. We shook hands across the table. It should have felt like a victory, but mostly it felt fragile. Like we were handling something made of glass that could shatter if either of us moved wrong. She moved back in this past Sunday. The house feels different now, less like a father and daughter sharing space, more like two adults learning to coexist respectfully. She keeps her schedule and her business to herself. I bite my tongue when she comes home at midnight or eats ice cream for breakfast. But there are moments. Yesterday morning, I was reading the newspaper in the kitchen when she came down for coffee. She asked what I was reading, and we ended up having a 20-minute conversation about local politics. Not deep or personal, but normal. Like two people who might actually choose to spend time together. It's a start, a fragile, uncertain start, but it's something. The therapy session is scheduled for next week. I'm terrified and hopeful in equal measure. I know this is probably my last chance to get it right with Jen. I can't afford to mess it up again. For the first time in months, I'm sleeping through the night. Having her in the house, even as a tenant rather than my daughter, feels like I can breathe again. I just hope I can prove to her that I really have learned how to be better. Time will tell.